So we left off, we had finished up the work on the block here. Walk us through what your game plan is.
Well, we're going to try to reuse the rods and pistons here. We are putting new rings on. So I'm going to pull the old rings off here, clean the pistons, measure them up, make sure they're good, and then I'm going to take the rods off the pistons and we will resize the big end of the rods.
We do have that one piston that obviously kissed the valve, but shouldn't affect anything.
Yeah.
Obviously we'll look it over good. You should probably at least check that one for bend and twist.
Yeah, we'll
maybe
definitely.
We should just check all of them.
Yeah, we'll check all of them when we get done resizing the big end. Well, these old engines like this, instead of having clips to hold the pin in the rod here or press fit into the rod, they have a cinch bolt. There's a split in the eye of the rod, and when you tighten that, that draws the rod up tight on the pin. Not used a lot, but there were several engines that had this type setup. This bar here is actually the bar we use in our straightening fixture to align the rods, but it works real well to hold the rod here so I can loosen that bolt without twisting the rod. Because if I was to just clamp this rod in a vise and start torquing on that bolt there, I could twist and bend the rod. So this supports it by the pin so that there's no chance of causing any damage. Works good here to hold that all in place, because see there, as I'm taking that bolt out, it starts sliding apart and I don't have to worry about anything falling and hitting the floor.
While you're doing that, I'm going to spend some time here, go through, kind of get everything clean one more time and get our cam bearings put in and get this block ready to go together. Come clean?
Almost. It probably did not have much more than 10 miles or 10 minutes, whatever it was the customer said. I think their carburetor was probably not adjusted as well as it could be. And then of course, once that valve hung open, that would have really messed up the mixture, because all of the, every time that piston came up, it would have been shoving back up the intake. And who knows how long he ran it after it did that.
Turns nice.
Cool.
You know, every once in a while we get a comment asking about the cleaning guy's rug, and I really don't want those comments to ever start up about me, so I take care of my hair with Keeps. Keeps is an online subscription service that makes it easy and affordable to treat male pattern baldness. Keeps makes it more convenient than ever before by delivering a personalized treatment plan that's recommended by a licensed medical provider straight to your door. Whether you're looking to prevent hair loss, stimulate hair growth, or just take better care of the hair that you have, Keeps has you covered. Keeps offers both of the FDA-approved hair loss treatment options, as well as a 2-in-1 gel that combines both treatments. And according to clinical studies, treatments offered by Keeps are 90% effective at treating hair loss and can increase hair growth by up to 35%. There's no need to worry if you're feeling a little bit self-conscious about your hair loss, as treatments are delivered in discreet, non-branded packaging. You can receive expert care right from your home by messaging your medical provider or the Keeps care team anytime via their secure messaging portal. I don't see why you wouldn't give it a try when it's this easy and affordable, but you don't have to take my word for it. Keeps has already helped nearly 1 million men keep their hair, with over 4,500 5-star reviews from happy customers. So remember, hair loss stops with Keeps. For a special offer to get started, go to keeps.com/JimsAuto or click the link in the description. That's KEEPS.com/JimsAuto. Thank you to Keeps for sponsoring this video. To resize the connecting rods, we're going to grind some material off the mating surface of the connecting rod itself, as well as the rod cap. Some people call us hacks for doing this. There are people on the internet who like that. There are people on the internet who don't like that. Kind of an old school thing to angle cut the connecting rod. What that does is when you torque the rod cap back on, it kind of pulls the sides of the connecting rod in tight.
Well, that's it. When we grind off the parting line here, and we put the cap back on, we can make this hole smaller in the vertical direction here, but we can't do anything to suck the sides in. But if we grind just a slight angle on that, it'll help pull the sides in to make this hole closer to being round, so that when we hone it back to standard size, we can make a more perfect circle out of it again.
So we'll grind the connecting rod caps as well, but you just do a straight cut.
Yeah.
On that.
Grind just enough to clean them up. The other thing we do here, just to make the bearing slide in without scraping the back of the bearing, is take this sharp edge off. What works well is this belt sander. Just touch it on there, just enough to break that edge. And then we'll do the same thing with the rod itself. Just a little bit there.
So he's got the rough stones in and just gradually bringing them back out till 0 would be, I assume, the...
0 would be the tight side of spec. 0 to 5/10 into the green is where I want to end up.
We usually bring them within 1/2 to 1 from tight side with the rough stones.
With the rough stone, 1/2 to 1 is a good place to stop. I'll come back with the finished stone and bring them to size.
Okay. So there's the rough grit. Here's the finished grit.
There I am, about 3/10, 2.5, 3/10 away. Anywhere from the 0 to 5 lines past 0 into the green is my spec. And I know this is a little bit warm. I usually shoot for the middle, but this was a little bit warm after all that honing, so I'll actually let this sit and cool for a little while and come back and check it again. But I'm going to say I'm virtually done at that point. Okay, we'll open up the tray cabinet, put our rods in the basket, put that for just a couple minutes, and once that's done, we'll get them out, be ready to check. Okay, rods should be done. So now I'm going to put all the bolts back in the small end of the rod. There we go. Pins are a little stiff to get in there. I'll just barely snug it. Okay, now we're going to check our rods for bend and twist. And when you're doing rods like this, you always want to check and make sure they are not bent first. So I'll put this fixture on here against the pin, measure between, and see what we've got. Okay, feels equal there, so the rod is not bent. Now we'll go this direction against the pin, 90 degrees the opposite, and that one feels good too. There is no twist in that rod. Let's check the next one. Not bent. It has a little bit of twist. There is a simple fix for that. We go over here and put the rod in the vise, and we give it just a little twist back where it belongs. Doesn't take much. So I'm going to give it a little bit this direction. I feel like there may be a little tiny bit of bend in there. Yeah, that feels real good that direction. Now the opposite way. That feels good too. And that part is done. One more thing these rods have, and I hope you can see that. There is a little tiny oil hole here that has to spit oil from that hole in the bearing up onto the cam and the cylinder wall. We want to make sure those are all open, and I'm looking through that right now. I can see daylight through there just fine. So with that, I'm going to take the pins back out of these. We need to measure the pistons yet, make sure they're in good shape, and then I'll put the pistons back on and slip the pins in and cinch up these bolts again, and these will be ready to install in the engine. So everyone knows I've been doing this for a lot of years, and I've always just measured my pistons with your regular old C-clamp micrometer. But here a while back, Nicholas bought this tool here. This is actually kind of cool. I'm not going to admit that to him, but it's for measuring things like pistons and sleeves and whatnot. And you can see here that I've put a 3-inch standard in. I have this dial over here zeroed, and I have the micrometer zeroed. So now I can take that standard back out, and I can put one of these pistons in there and measure the skirt of the piston and know exactly what size it is way more accurately than I ever could with a micrometer. So let's give that a try and see what happens. I'm going to measure down low, and I'm going to measure up here just below the rings. These pistons, being 60 over for a 3 9/16 inch bore size, should measure 3.622 and a half. And now when I put this piston in and slip it through here, it should tell me how far I am from that dimension. And if I get the highest point there, you will see on this gauge over here that I'm actually 0.02 smaller than that dimension. So that would be our normal clearance if we bored that block to the nominal bore size of 60 over 3 9/16. But as you recall, we did hone that block just a little bit looser. It'll probably have 1.5 thousandths more than that. So we'll probably be in the range of 3 to 3.5 thousandths. But I want to run through my pistons here and make sure they're all good. 0, 2, 0, 0, 2, 0. How about 0, 0, 2, 3? Pretty close the same again. 0, 2, 3. And that was even our bad piston, the one prior there, the one, or not bad, but it's the one the valve hit. I'm going to refer to it as a bad piston just because it has a blemish in the top now. 0, 2, 2, and there's another 0, 0, 2, 0. So now I want to measure up the top of the skirt so I can make this adjustment here and lower the plate down. Okay, that's as low as we can go, so that's a good place. You know, actually I did that wrong. I should have just flipped the piston over. That would have been a lot easier. So let's go back up. Hey, it's one of my first times using this machine. There's always something to learn.
You know what fail means?
What's fail mean?
First attempt in learning.
Well, I failed. So I'm going to turn this piston over this way and use my brain. We are now 0028. 0027. How about 0028? 0027. 0028. And now our piston, you can see, has the mark on it that contacted the valve when that valve stuck open. This is a piston I'm worried about. 0028. So the bottom of the skirt, we range from 2 thousandths clearance past nominal to 0023, which is pretty negligible. And on the top of the skirt, we range from 0027 to 0028. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this piston. That did not hurt it one bit other than cosmetically. someday if somebody opens this motor up, they're going to wonder what happened. With the extra that we've honed the cylinders, the extra that it was bored a little bit to begin with, plus the extra that we honed the cylinders, we're going to be up in the range of probably 3.5 thousandths clearance on the between the piston and cylinder wall, which is a little looser than we'd normally make this, but it's still well within acceptable limits. It'll never cause any problem. Be a nice free running engine that way. I'm just going to put a mark on the front of each one of these rods so I know that side is for sure front, and then I can get them on the pistons a little bit easier with a little less confusion. So the first thing I need to do is once again oil up my cinch bolts, and I'll start those. And I do want to lubricate all of the pins and the rods as I put those in, so I'll get out a little ketchup here. That usually works pretty good. Put a little inside each pin bore, put a little bit on each pin before I slip it in. On our pistons here we have a little notch to mark front, so I'm going to go ahead and see if I can slip that pin through there. And this will take, there we go, I was going to say take just a little bit of persuasion to make that go in, and they're all on. And let's see if I can get these torqued on and finish this job.
I saw some pictures on Instagram of what happens. Send an engine out that you've done machine work on, and you remind the customer, make sure you torque that bolt, and they don't torque that bolt.
Uh-oh. They end up having to put some sleeves in?
I think they ended up having to get a new block.
Okay, that looks good. We've got front, we've got front. Whoa, knocked the camera over. Okay, so I've got the crankshaft for a 235 mounted up in the crank grinder here. I'm hoping I'm not going to have to grind it. I hope all this is just a polish, but we do need to check it out real close. You know, we had some debris and stuff went through the bearings on that engine, and there are some scratches in these journals, but I don't think there's any of them that are going to cause us any issues. So I want to get the mic out here and we'll measure all of these journals and see where we're at. So there I've got 2.2818. Check the other side. 2.2819. So let me record that over here. Okay, I wonder what size they are supposed to be. The rods are supposed to be 2.311 to 2.312. And if we take away 30 thousandths, 2.281.
Is that that calculator that our math teachers told us we wouldn't have in our pocket
Yep.
all the time?
Yep, we were always told. In fact, we were told you won't even have a slide rule in your pocket. Had to lose your math, learn your math, because there would not be any slide rules or calculators in our pocket.
Not even an abacus.
No. 2.2820. I think we're really good. Look at all these numbers. I think our lowest is 2.2817, which is 3/10 away from the high side, and we have several of the journals that are all measuring on the high side of spec. So we are much closer to the high side than we are the low side, so there should not be any problem polishing this crankshaft and having the rods come out good. So now I got to do the same check on the mains. Okay, since there's not anything much more boring than just going through and taking different measurements on a crankshaft, off camera I did go through and took the measurements, 4 measurements on each of the main journals of this crankshaft. And remember, this crankshaft, each one is, I believe, about 30 thousandths smaller than the next. Back is the biggest, front's the smallest. But anyway, took all my measurements here. The dark black is the spec out of our shop manual here, and this crankshaft was ground very nice. I don't see anything at all wrong with the way it was ground. It is a good strong 30 under on rods and mains. Ground towards the higher side of spec. They allow about 1/1000th variation to be still considered on size, and it is actually ground a little closer to the tight side, so it should run a long time. I'm going to go ahead and polish this and be ready to put back in the engine. Just like your buzz wheel pads that you use to clean gaskets off. Okay, now I'm changing back to a little bit narrower abrasive type belt. I'm going to polish the seal surface. If I was grinding this crank, I would have touched the wheel on there and taken just a very light cut to square that all up real nice. But actually, considering the age of this crank and how many miles I think it probably has on it, that seal surface is actually in pretty good shape. I don't think we'll have any trouble with that. But anyway, there you have it. Crankshaft is completely polished. Looks very nice. All those scratches pretty well came out of it. Pretty much looks like a fresh grind. So I'll blow that off and it'll be ready to go back in the engine again. So the last time we were measuring these caps on that block, bearings 2, 3, and 4 feel like they fit just fine. But these have been on and off several times. The bolt has a little raised edge under the hex head that has kind of rolled the metal over on the top edge on these caps. So I'm going to put this on the hone and we're going to run through there, clean that up just a little bit so it's not rolled over into the hole. And then we also got some hardened washers that we're going to put on under the head of the bolts. Like this one here, it's flaked away just a little bit on the edge. I suppose we could spot face that off, but we're just going to opt to put a hardened washer on there. And then on that number 1 cap, that'd be this one, that seemed like we couldn't get it side to side quite enough to line up. I'm going to hone just a little extra out of these to give us a little more clearance on the shaft of the bolt there, so it'll hopefully line up for us. And another thing I want to do is take a countersink. I wonder if we can relieve the edge on that hole where the dowel goes in there just a little bit. Let's just kind of go in that hole there and just hit that lightly. And I think that'll relieve that edge, because when we took this apart the last time, it looked like the bearing where that dowel is on there to go down in that hole, it looked like it was pushing up on it a little bit. And I'm wondering if the edge wasn't relieved quite enough. Probably the new bearing had a little more of a radius than what these did from the factory. We managed to find another set of Federal Mogul 30 under bearings. So 2154 CPL, meaning lower, 30 under. It's in. And look at this, how the bearing extends past the parting line of the cap. And on the block here, it doesn't quite reach. That's the way they're made. And we're going to use the washers. And we're just going to use engine oil on this for lubrication, because that's all these engines ever, back in the day when they were new, that's how they were assembled. You're going to find something to put under the corner of this, because that drives me crazy. So I set our gauge to the diameter that we measured on the crankshaft here. So now if I measure the inside of that bearing, it'll tell us exactly how much clearance we've got. So there we are, right at 2.5. And if I move over to the side here, just want to make sure we're not too tight. About 3.5. And I go back over this way, probably almost 4. But our up and down direction,
I'd call it a strong 2.
yeah, it's not quite 2.5. What does our book say we can have? 13 tenths to 43 tenths.
So you're
So we're right in the ballpark on it. I'm happy with that.
okay. Let's get
So-
the next one torqued on.
Yeah, so we can consider that one okay. This bearing is supposed to have anywhere from a half to 4 thousandths clearance. And when I go vertical on it, a strong 2.5. So I'm happy with that one. Oh, that was a little tighter. 1.5. Now let me check side to side. About a half. Whoa. Oh yeah, we didn't get lined up very well. But what I'm concerned about is the up and down here, strong 1.5. And this one too can have a half to 3.5. Well, half to 33 tenths. I think we're gonna be fine. We'll know as soon as we put the crank in if it doesn't turn, as soon as we start torquing it. So I'm gonna say let's go with it. This front problem cap on the block now, we've honed the holes out just a little bit to give it some clearance on the bolts. And I'm gonna hold that as square as I can. Okay, I've got this set to the diameter of the crank. And when I go vertical here, 5.5, but we don't have it torqued yet, so I'm not worried about that. Let's see what I am side to side. 3, strong 3. And this way, tell me what it is.
Might be 3.5.
Okay, that's looking good.
It's closer than it ever was the other
closer
day.
than it ever was before. Okay, we're torqued down. Let's see what we've got for vertical clearance.
Just shy of 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
So now let's try side to side. So your way.
Just above 4, 4.5.
And when we go on my side here, 3 and almost a half. So actually I'm a little bit too far that way now. Obviously we have clearance, so.
Yeah.
What do you say we take all those caps back off, put the rear main seal in, lay the crank in there, torque it down,
See if it spins and go to bed?
I'll bet it spins and we can go to bed then.
Okay.
Because it's another late night.
Okay.
Why do we keep doing this?
I don't know.
Well, I hopped on eBay and lo and behold, I found a new old stock Felpro neoprene rear seal. It's nice and pliable. It's not all hard or anything. The knife edge goes to the inside, and I'm gonna put it off center just a little bit so it doesn't line up with the parting line here. I don't know if it really makes much difference, but I've heard that you can eliminate some sealing issues if you have the seal rotated just a little bit in there. Let's put some chili sauce lube in it. Put a little bit on the seal itself here. Get some on the thrust surface of the bearing. There, look at that. We'll throw a little lube on each one here and make sure I get some on the seal surface of the crank. This is supposed to be really good stuff. No oil can seep between the parting line. There we go. The front cap, second cap, thrust cap. Let's bring the other 3 down and then we'll bump this one.
Okay.
Okay, and what this is going to do when we bump that crank back and forth is help align the thrust bearing cap. And I always end with thumping it forward because your clutch is going to put the pressure on this side of the cap. Okay, there we are. We're torqued in. The end of this is the same as small block Chevy, so we've got a socket that fits those. So yeah, look how easy that turns. I wonder how we are on in play. Have we got a screwdriver laying here?
No, I put them all away.
Why'd you put tools away?
Because it's annoying when he gets mad that I don't have my tools put away. Yet he does the same thing.
Okay, let's see if we've got any in play here. We do.
Five,
Yeah, we're about 5 thousandths.
4 to 5.
Yep.
We still don't know what the heck. Why did they have a 20 and a 30 bearing in that?
Quite honestly, I think it was just a mistake. I think it was something that was packaged wrong.
I think so too. We started to wonder the other day if maybe that cap was wonky and they...
Yeah, the cap was a little bit off before we opened those holes up so we could shift it. But I really don't think that's what was tying the crank up. I think they just flat had the wrong bearing in the package, and they put it in and
Didn't even think about it.
didn't look at it, didn't think about it. And as luck would have it, it was a thinner bearing rather than a thicker bearing, so it didn't tie the crank up, and they shipped it.
It's kind of lucky but unlucky.
Yeah.
Because if it had been a tighter bearing, they would have noticed.
They would have noticed because it had tied the crank up. They wouldn't have been able to turn it.
That looks like it turns pretty nice.
And I know the questions are going to come up. Why didn't you plastic gauge this? The reason we did not plastic gauge this is because plastic gauge is an indicator. It is not an exact science of what kind of clearance you have. But we know exactly what clearance we have because we measured the crank and we measured every single bearing along the way, and we know we're right in where we're supposed to be. We don't need the plastic gauge in there to tell us that.
Let's call it a night.
Yeah, let's call it a night, and I think putting the rest of this engine together will be smooth sailing from here. We've got the hard part done. Okay, according to Process, our top ring should be 12 to 22, and same way on the second ring.
Okay. So we had like 19 or 20-ish on both of them.
Okay, so
and then the oil ring, I put it in there, and there's all kinds.
okay, should be good to go on them then. So I was not anticipating having any problem, but you never know. It's good to check. Expand it just enough to go on. Okay, so I always like to just take a band of our assembly lube and put a little around the top of the cylinder wall here. We've got number 1 piston here. We mixed them up. This is the one that valve had hit. What was that, number 3 or 4?
Yeah.
Before, and we've switched. They're going to go back in a different hole, but we've measured everything, and everything checks out fine. There's no big deal of where they're going to end up. So there's the first one. There's 1. There's number 6. We're using new nuts. Whoops. You always put one inside the motor, don't you? Mm-hmm. And I always like to, before I make them real tight, take a rubber hammer, rubber mallet here, and bump them back and forth. That does help line the cap up just a little bit. Wow, look at that, it still turns. And checking here, I have side play. I don't feel any excessive play that direction. Oh!
BS.
Oh! It won't turn. Let's see how we are on deck height, being as we cut the top of the block. So there I've zeroed the dial. Was that about 27 or 8?
Yeah, 27 probably.
Maybe 30 on that one.
28 or 9, 30. Seems pretty reasonable across all.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed. We've had motors we've built where we really tried to get everything right as far as piston height, and they weren't as close as this one is from one end to the other.
Yep.
So that crank must be really good on stroke length, and all our rods must be really close on stroke length. Some people were worried that we decked enough off the block that it was going to create a problem, but there's all kinds of room on these engines. We could have gone another probably 25 thousandths, and had nothing to worry about. The way we lubed that cylinder, you can't see it here in the video, but I can feel that, and that cylinder feels like there is lubrication all the way down just from that pulling that oil down with the rings.
Yeah.
You look at it here, there's some lines. That is the rings already trying to seat themselves into the cylinder wall. I watched another video here the other day. Someone had out there about cylinder finishes and seating the rings, and they had the same thing going on in theirs. And once the rings do seat, you won't see that anymore. Okay, so this old engine had Pell nuts on it. My honest opinion, those probably don't do a bit of good. But that's what they used to do back in the day, is put this extra little flimsy stamped steel nut on as a lock nut on the rod bolts. So we're going to put them back on just because, put it back like it was when it was new, whether it does any good or not. I'm going to use a little speed handle here to run those on till it just touches. Now, from the information I could find on these, looked like anywhere from a quarter to a half turn was acceptable on tightening. I'm going to go 1/3 of a turn, which would be kind of in between a quarter and a half. I think Pell nuts are one of them things that it just makes you feel good because they're there.
It makes me feel kind of nervous that they're there because I'm thinking about when they come off.
Yeah, that's what I think about too, but they don't seem to. Or at least I've never seen an engine that they came off on. Basically rotating assemblies together. We need to gather up some new hardware. The screws here for that timing cover, countersunk type screw, but they are a little bit special. They're pretty thin, but they're so messed up from being on and off so many times. I'm going to go see if I can find some new ones before we proceed any farther. Okay. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
When I got ready to get my gasket set for this engine, full gasket sets are no longer available from Felpro. I had to order a head set and then piece out the timing set and the oil pan, all those pieces separately. I did manage to go to town and found some stainless steel countersunk type bolts. You know, this engine's 65 plus years old. Who knows how many times some of these parts, these plates, side covers, valve cover, oil pan have been on and off. And I'm not always a big fan of smearing silicone all over everything, but one place I have found it's really good is when you have something like this that maybe is not quite as straight as it's supposed to be. So I like to put just a real thin coating of silicone on some of these kinds of gaskets, and it'll help seal up the nooks and crannies and maybe take care of a little bit of warpage on parts. It has a passage that comes over here to take some oil across, and you'll see when we put this piece on where it has a squirter that goes onto the right there. This little squirter oils the timing gears. Clean up a little bit of our Loctite that's spewing out of there. Another thing I don't like the looks of is this key. It's pretty chewed up. So I'm going to take that out. I have a brand new one we can put in here. Don't you think that looks better than what that old one was?
Too bad the new one's Chinesian.
It might not be. It's a box of keys I've had around here for a long time. Okay, so let's bring this around on top dead center, and I think we'll be ready to put the camshaft in. Does appear to be a brand new camshaft that was put in when this engine was done the last time. So yeah, give or take 10 miles as we've been told. It actually looks very nice. Looks like it was breaking in as it should. We kept all the lifters in order, numbered them when we took them out so we can put them right back where they were. But regardless, I'm going to give this a liberal coating of our driven break-in lube, or assembly lube, camshaft and lifter assembly lube. We've had real good luck with their products. We figure we'll do this as if it was brand new, as opposed to already having a few miles on it. I want to lube up the thrust plate here, get a little oil worked in behind it. That is something we changed just a little bit. That gear was not quite all the way on the cam when we took it apart. It had about 10 12 thousandths in play in it. And I heated the gear up a little bit, put it in the press, and it did pop on just a little bit. Now, you told me you had this cam in here already and it fits, is that right?
I've got it on camera.
Okay, because I don't want to end up part way in and find out it won't go any further or it's tight. And we will spin the oil pump and pre-lube this thing before it leaves here after we get everything assembled. Normally, I would have put this in before we did the, well, you really can't.
Can't really do this.
I was going to say I'd have put this in before the crank, but you can't because of this front plate. I thought you said it'd go in.
It does.
I see a problem. The crank is hitting right there. There it goes. It's in. One tooth off. That was from when I turned that crank just a little bit to get the cam in. How's that look?
I suppose that'll work.
That goes in there like it should. And that one goes in. Okay. We've got just a little bit of backlash in the gear. Yeah, I can just barely feel some in play there. I'm going to call it good. That has a good feel to it. This front cover, I've straightened it as well as I can, but it is warped just a little bit. So I'm going ahead using the paper gasket, but I've coated both sides of it with a real light coating of silicone sealer on there. Put a little lube on the gears here. About like that. And these are some of where the name comes from. The old stove bolt head screws. It's frustrating using those because they're so hard to hang on to. They're small screwdriver slots in there. These that I'm putting in here right now are the ones that only go through into this plate. There are two I have marked down here that use longer screws that go all the way into the block itself. Gotta have to really pay attention on this because there's so many different length screws in various places. You'll have to listen to my wrist here, but I am torquing this. Click, click. We've got our rock arms laid out. Remember when we took this apart, I told you there's 4 different styles of rock arms. So anyway, we got to get that sorted out now, get these back in order. We did get some brand new rock arm shafts. Those were in stock and reasonably priced. So we got our shaft here. Which one do you suppose? Not that one. Okay, there we go. And then one of these. And then would it be one of these? Look at that. Yeah, blue. Okay. There we've got our order on that one. Okay, there we've got our order figured out for the rocker arms. We could probably go ahead and screw these down in.
It's a big puzzle.
Big puzzle. So all engines are.
High stakes puzzle.
Okay, deck is clean and dry. So how do we want to go about sitting that head on there?
Do you have any studs with this thread that you could put some studs in so it guides us down? And
man, you're smarter than you look.
I know. That'll keep the gasket in place.
Help us set it down on
Guide the head down on. I'll have to put the camera on a tripod. So if I go...
Yeah, if you go like that. Look at that. Oh! I thought we were down. I guess we weren't. What were we hung up on?
I don't know.
Okay, well, head's on there. Yeah.
All right.
How'd your workout?
Yeah. So the oil comes up through the line here, comes into this fitting, comes up to the bottom of that head bolt, kind of fills up the, I don't know, the bore in the head where the head bolt is, to the point where this is drilled across to this hole up here, and that's what will eventually oil the rocker shaft. But we need to put a plug in right here. Grab that air gun, and just to show that this is clear, okay.
You tried to show that we engraved the numbers on the side of the lifter so we'd know where they went. Except you forgot to turn the camera on. Except now I can't read your writing.
I'm not the one who engraved them. That's an 11.
Okay. Okay, we need to put a little lube on them before we put them in. Just a little bit on the bottom of them. Wouldn't hurt to just put a little on the outside there. I'm surprised for how old this is and how many times it's probably been apart that those oil lines are not chewed up more. Okay, so we're ready to put this together for real.
I think so.
And the spring. A little bit of lube again. There we go. So now when we put this all on there is when it gets tricky. Because we've got to get this and the springs and everything all together at once.
That tube bait.
Except we've got some rocker arms positioned wrong. Why those two need switched? We're not supposed to show people
I don't
this
know.
kind of stuff.
Somebody will have to pay attention to earlier in the video if we screwed that up from the get-go, or these two
These two there need switched with each other.
When you put it back on this time, there'll be 3 that are...
3 that are not right?
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
For me, usually.
Ah, we put that back on backwards.
Who's we?
Well, you were standing there.
That looks more like it.
Specification on this is 6 on the intake and 13 on the exhaust. But it's hot. And we're not hot, we're cold. So let's think about this a little bit. Everything we're working with here is cast iron or steel that has relatively the same rate of expansion when it gets hot. I don't think it's going to change a whole lot when it gets hot, other than the valves are going to be running considerably hotter because they're in the combustion. They're going to grow in length, tighten up the clearance. So I don't know if this makes any sense or not, but let's make the intake valves 1/1000th looser, and let's make the exhaust 2/1000 looser. And I think that'll get this thing at least running, and when the customer has it in and has it up to temperature, he'll have to go back through and adjust them again. But I'll bet we'll be real close with that. So anyway, I've got a 7/1000 here. That feels pretty good there. And there's a 13 or a 15.
It's not a very enjoyable process.
No, it's not much fun doing these. I think that'll work for that one. So now we need to go to the next one in firing order. That feels pretty good. Working on our 235 oil pump and pickup tube. That engine did have a brand new oil pump in it. We took it apart. Everything looks real nice in it. We're just going to put it back together. But it has kind of a questionable pickup screen on it. But I cannot get a new pickup screen, so we're just going to have to go with this one. Somebody has kind of cut a couple of them apart, welded a piece back on there. Not exactly what I'd like to have, but it is what it is. But anyway, get a good look down in here. Look at what is inside this thing. It is clear full of miller bugs. How did all those miller bugs get in this thing?
I think other people call them miller moths.
I call them miller bugs. I don't care what other people call them. But yeah, it's clear full of those things. So we're going to have to spend a little extra time here, clean those all out, and make sure there's no other debris of any kind in there, but we can make this work again.
You're the cleaning guy, so that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I'm the cleaning guy. I can make this work. Nasty. So I've got the parts here from the old oil pump. We're going to go ahead and put it back together. Actually, it's not an old pump. Remember, it's just like the rest of the motor here. Only had about 10 miles on it, and everything in it looks real nice. Customer had requested that I put in a new one, but makes me wonder now if that was because of that bearing that was in there, if he thought we didn't have the correct oil pressure. But I see nothing at all wrong with this one. There is no reason to spend the money on a new pump. So we'll just put this one back together, and I think it'll make a good engine for him again. So I'm going to have two hands here to put this on. I'm going to go ahead and put just a little bit of assembly lube in here. You don't want to use anything too thick in an oil pump, because the first thing it does is pumps it all into your valve lifters, and then your lifters don't work right. The oil pump is back together again,
Wow.
screen and all.
No millers.
No millers. Okay, the oil pumps on these 235s are a little unusual compared to, say, other small block Chevrolet V8s, or as far as that goes, most other US made motors. There's a hole bored in the side here, a little casting there. The pump slips down into, and there's a pointed bolt that locks into this hole to hold the oil pump in place. Ahead of time, I made a mark on here just to help me, so I'd kind of know how deep that pump was supposed to go in to get that bolt to line up. You have to drop the pump down in like that, and then it has this tube that connects to the pump and pumps the oil over into the block, into the passages on the block. And it's always a little cantankerous to get in. So I'm going to start it up in there and try to get my tube started on this side, and then work that down in. And when I get this worked down to about the right height, I think I'll be able to start these fittings. Sometimes they're really hard to get started and get them started straight. I'm just going to make them finger tight. Start tightening this up. It's one of them that you can turn just a flat or so at a time on the bolt, sometimes having to turn the wrench side to side as you go. But you eventually get it tightened up, and then it has a lock nut down there to lock the bolt once you do have it tight against the pump. There, that's got that pump pretty well locked. And get on that lock nut and lock it in place. And there we have it. So now I'll come back and tighten the fittings. There we have it. Oil pump is installed. Basically, we got the whole long block together, ready to put the covers on. I've taken the oil pan and straightened out the flanges here as best we can. Someone at a prior time has made a repair down there in the bottom for the drain plug. I've got my cork side gaskets laid out here. It has a rubber end piece that goes on. I'm going to put a little silicone under all the corners where they come together here. I'm going to use a little weather strip adhesive here and there just to help hold this gasket in place, not as a means to seal it. And same way under here, I'm going to put some on this to kind of glue it down, because where these main bolts come through, it's cut pretty narrow there. So I want to make sure that everything's held in place where it's going to go. I'm going to pull these back and put just a teeny tiny little dab in that corner. Stick it in place so it'll transfer a little bit of the adhesive to the other side. And then since this is kind of a contact cement, I'm going to pull it back apart and let it dry just for a few seconds here while I'm doing the other side. Now again, I want just a little bit of silicone in each corner here before those go together. Little goes a long ways. Make sure everything stays in place. I'm going to put just a little bit in these corners on top because those old stamped steel pans are not all the curvatures on them are as good as they could be. Okay, did you tighten the rod nuts?
I didn't. Did you tighten the ones down there?
Yes, I did those. I think. No, I did. I did those over in the, after we got done resizing the rods. Okay, so I got drain plug, new gasket. There's that. Let's roll it up on the side and see if we can do the side cover. So this side cover is kind of bent up. And again, I straightened it the best I can. And I hate to do this because it makes things really hard to get apart. But I think I'm going to throw away that cork gasket and I'm just going to silicone that thing on so it'll seal up tight. So we've got all of the silicone all the way around there. I probably should engrave my name in here because I know the next guy that takes this off is really going to cuss me because it is not going to come off easily. But I'll bet it does not leak up until that point, and that's what I'm after right now, is a leak-free motor. Okay, there we are. Now these are kind of funny looking. They're the same little bolt like I used on the oil pan, but they have a screwdriver slot in them. I think that's factory. They look too good to be what somebody did. I think that was kind of early when they went away from the stove bolts to the hex head, and they just couldn't quite give up.
Yeah, some of the old guys couldn't let go.
The old guys couldn't give up the screwdriver slot in there. And if we look at that, you can see just a little bit oozing around the edges. So I know it's sealed good, but I don't have blobs of it everywhere we look. So now the valve cover is going to have to come back off several times over the life of this engine. In fact, it's going to have to come off, I'm going to tell a customer, sometime within the first 500 miles of this engine, he ought to take the valve cover off and run the overhead here and get the valves adjusted right. What I'm going to do is glue this gasket down to the head. If you had some artistic talents, we'd paint this and then you could highlight the Chevrolet in black. Make it look pretty sweet. So I got a nice coating of weather strip adhesive on the gasket there. I need to pull that back up and get a little air to it so it dries.
So you kind of hoping when they pull the valve cover off later on,
My plan is the gasket will stay with the head and then just lift the valve cover off and then put it right back on after they adjust the valves. That's my hope anyway. And the other thing we ought to do, I'm not going to snug this down any extra tight, because we ought to put oil in this motor and spin the oil pump too and take the valve cover off and look at it, make sure it's oiling. I think that's pretty crazy that they expect that big a cover to be held down by 4 little bolts with a cork gasket and to actually seal up.
yeah.
We got the engine all put together here, all the last little details on it. Got a coat of paint on it. We could probably stand to use it, put another spray can of paint on that, but I ran out. So this is what it's going to be for right now. But I think we're ready to put the oil in, and let's spin the oil pump and prime this thing. I put a gauge in over here on this side so we can see if it does in fact make any oil pressure, and I would hope it would with all the right bearings and everything in there. So let's start, get the oil in it.
Not 5 thou extra clearance on
No,
the.
not 5 extra, whether it needs it or not. I saw a lot of comments about people saying, hey, I've heard that you can mix and match bearings to get the right clearance. And I think what they're referring to is maybe putting a standard bearing with a 1/2 and a 1 under on the other half to change your clearance just a little bit. But I don't think they had in mind putting a 20 under with a 30 under to make the clearance.
Driven BR30 braking oil.
Yeah, driven BR30 oil that I really like. I think that's good stuff for breaking in a motor and for flat tappet cam motors. Even when I did my tractor, Driven makes a diesel break-in oil, and I used that in my tractor. Let's spin it and see if we get any oil pressure.
Okay.
I've just got an old distributor that we pulled the shaft out of, has the screwdriver blade on it, which will engage with the oil pump on this engine down in there like that. So watch there, see if we get oil pressure.
Yep.
How much?
Just shy of 40 pounds.
Really?
Yeah.
And I hardly even turned this thing.
Yeah. Do it again. 45.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to leave that hang there. Let's take the valve cover off because I would like to watch. Let's take the valve cover off. And it did. Hopefully, I was thinking like last night when we talked about gluing the gasket to the head, but no sealer between the head and the cover.
Yep.
So the cover came off nice. Look at this.
Yeah, I see oil.
Yeah, just that little bit. We've already got oil up here. There it is.
I didn't know there was a hole in that tube.
You know, I'd forgot about that too, but there is. That keeps it from siphoning and pulling the oil out.
Okay.
Look at here. It just came out the rockers.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yep.
Let me give it just a little bit more here. You can see it. There it comes. There it is. I'm pretty impressed. Steady flow of oil. We've put little cardboard plugs in the spark plug holes to keep anything from getting in there, but as soon as we start turning it, the compression's probably going to blow those out of there. So tell me when you're ready.
Ready?
Yep. Woo! Hey, you're shooting me over here. Ow, that hurt. Is that all of them? That should make it turn easier. See, we have a run-in stand too.
Yeah.
Powered by Nicholas.
Think we're good?
Yeah, we're good. I'm really pleased with the way that's oiling. It's together, valves are all adjusted. Obviously has compression the way it blew our
Plugs out.
all of our little cardboard spark plug hole plugs out. So you done looking at it?
Yeah, bolt that cover on. I'm tired of it. So we're done.
Yeah, we're done. Good timing. We're coming up on the end of the month here. We can get this out on this month's books. Make it look like we made some money for once. This has been kind of fun to do. I don't think there is probably any engine that could come in here that would be any simpler to do than what this one is.
Yep.
It's modern in the sense that it has all insert bearings, just a simple overhead valve, gear-to-gear timing. I don't know how you could make a simpler engine than what this is. So it's been kind of fun. It's just a pleasure to do something that you can feel you're more at ease doing. You really don't have to think too hard other than just do things right. I think it's ready to go back to the customer, and he can put it back in his truck, see if he'll run.
And it only has to go 11 miles.
If it goes 11 miles, we've done better than the last time around, so that's what we're after. That's our goal, is 11 miles.
Always better than the last guy.